Thank you all for being here today, and on behalf of the Board of Governors of the East-West Center, we really appreciate your presence, as well as our next speaker, our U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, MaryKay Carlson, who we have been so pleased to welcome on our Honolulu campus at the East-West Center, has been a great supporter. On top of that, being an incredible leader. Just a little bit about her. She's been the ambassador since May 2022, so been here, seen a lot of changes over that time. She is a career member of the Foreign Service with the rank of Minister Counselor, and previously served as the Deputy Chief of Mission and Chargé d'Affaires in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and New Delhi, India. We have a lot of South Asia here today. A Foreign Service officer for a long time. I won't say the date, but it's in your bio. She's served as at U.S. diplomatic missions in China, Ukraine, Hong Kong, Mozambique, Kenya, and the Dominican Republic, and has had very senior roles in domestic assignments in the United States, serving as the director of the Secretary's Executive Secretariat Staff and the Deputy Director of Korean Affairs, and also a native of Little Rock, Arkansas, who, by the way, our East-West Center alumni chapter president is from Arkansas. So Ambassador Carlson has been a great champion of people to people and the mission of the East-West Center, and supportive of free and open media. So we are so honored to have her here today with us. We will appreciate the remarks, and we'll have an opportunity for me to sort of, in Hawaii, we say talk story with the ambassador, and kind of get to know her a little bit more and hear her views on what's happening in the Indo-Pacific and the U.S.-Philippines relations. So, Madam Ambassador.
Good morning. This really is an impressive audience. Susie, thank you so much for the introduction. And Secretary Manalo, thank you for your remarks. Very interesting comments on what's going on, especially in the West Philippine Sea. It is an honor to speak at the East-West Center's International Media Conference about the United States Indo-Pacific Strategy and the key role that the U.S.-Philippine relationship plays in that strategy. Before I get started, I'd also like to express my thanks to all journalists here today, representing media organizations from at least 40 countries. What an incredible gathering of talent. Some of the members of the Philippine media here today have heard me say that my husband, who's a retired diplomat himself, often looks up from the morning paper or from the television set to exclaim, "I love journalists." And it's a sentiment that I share. You may work in local markets, regionally, nationally, internationally, at all levels. The work that you do ensures your audiences are well informed. As guardians of the truth, you help hold leaders accountable, sometimes under extremely difficult and even dangerous circumstances. So thank you for everything that you do. The East-West Center, as you may know, was founded in 1960 to promote better understanding between the people and nations of the United States, Asia, and the Pacific. The center's creation was an acknowledgement that the United States, an Indo-Pacific nation, is committed to strengthening relations with Asia. In many ways, the center was an early proponent of what 60-plus years later became the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy. President Biden set forth the foundation of this strategy at the 2021 East Asia Summit, an Indo-Pacific that is free, open, connected, prosperous, resilient, and secure. When we talk about a free and open Indo-Pacific, we're talking about a region that is free from coercion, open to trade and investment, and governed by international law. This means fishers can earn their livelihoods in traditional fishing grounds without harassment, that countries can enjoy a healthy marine ecosystem, free from damage from dredging, overfishing, and land reclamation. It means enjoying a democratic way of life with a free press and a vibrant civil society. More broadly, the United States supports the ability for all countries to make their own choices and to raise the next generation with the confidence that peace and prosperity will prevail. When disputes arise, they should be resolved in accordance with international law. When the United States sees our partners being bullied in their own backyard, we speak up, and we encourage others to speak up as well, and they are doing so. The chorus against threats to peace and stability in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea is growing louder and stronger each day. With like-minded partners and all who support the rule of law, we are urging the PRC to cease harassment of Philippine vessels lawfully operating in the Philippine exclusive economic zones, to halt its disruption to states' sovereign rights to explore, utilize, conserve, and manage natural resources in their own EEZs, and to end interference with the freedoms of navigation and overflight of all states' lawfully operation, not only in this region, but around the world. The 2016 arbitral ruling that Secretary Manalo mentioned firmly rejected the PRC's expansive South China Sea maritime claims, including any PRC claim to the area determined by the arbitral tribunal to be a part of the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. We will continue to support the Philippines and other partners on these issues. Our vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific calls for strengthening the connections between the United States and our partners, adapting and modernizing these partnerships for the 21st century, and building new connections that advance shared goals. In the last 2 years, the Biden administration has committed to further modernize our alliances with partners in the Indo-Pacific region, including two of our most important allies, the Philippines and Japan. Our three countries, as maritime democracies, share a common vision for a free, open, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. We are committed to upholding democratic freedoms and a free market. Trilateral cooperation just makes good sense. President Biden, President Marcos, and Japanese Prime Minister Kishida agreed to take this partnership further at the Trilateral Leaders Summit in Washington this past April. During that meeting, they committed to advance the security and prosperity of all three nations, the Indo-Pacific, and the world, including through cooperation on economic growth, emerging technologies, climate, clean energy transition, and infrastructure. One major announcement from this meeting was the launch of the Luzon Economic Corridor, the first project under the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment and the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPEF, Investment Accelerator. Under this rubric, our three countries pledged to work together to advance investments in high-impact infrastructure projects in the corridor that links Subic, Clark, Manila, and Batangas, including rail, port modernization, agribusiness, clean energy, and semiconductor supply chains. The infrastructure improvements undertaken through this initiative promise to accelerate development and spur further private sector investment in an area that accounts for 50% of the Philippines' GDP. We are deepening our economic engagements with our partners in the region because we see that prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and prosperity in the United States are inextricably linked. The Indo-Pacific region accounts for 60% of global GDP and 2/3 of global economic growth. Trade between the United States and the Indo-Pacific region reached over $2 trillion in 2023, and the United States benefits from $956 billion in foreign direct investment from the Indo-Pacific. That is why we are working tirelessly together in the region to encourage innovation, to strengthen supply chains, and to expand economic opportunities. The Philippines is one of the most important U.S. partners in this effort, and the United States is one of the Philippines' largest export markets. In turn, here in the Philippines, U.S. companies are the highest taxpayers and among the largest investors. One U.S. company, Frontier Towers, has invested almost $2 billion in the telecom sector in just the past 3 years. Concentrix is the largest private sector employer in the Philippines, employing over 120,000 Filipinos. Texas Instruments is the Philippines' largest exporter by dollar value. And companies like Zero Motorcycles, Subcom, and Allegro Microsystems are investing in the Philippines' electric vehicle, telecommunications, and semiconductor sectors. In the crucial global semiconductor supply chain, the Philippines also plays a key role. Approximately 20% of the world's back-end operation for assembly, testing, and packaging, or ATP, occurs right here. The industry serves several critical U.S. sectors, such as defense and healthcare, the automobile industry, and consumer electronics. Because of the strategic importance to American industry, the United States will support the semiconductor sector here through funding from the CHIPS Act, which will help promote workforce development and regulatory reform, positioning the Philippines to move up the semiconductor value chain. Our partnership with the Philippines has strengthened under the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, IPEF as it's more commonly known, which represents an affirmative vision of economic cooperation among 14 allies and like-minded partners in the Indo-Pacific region. Working together, we are deepening economic cooperation across 4 pillars: trade, supply chains, clean energy, decarbonization and infrastructure, and tax and anti-corruption. For all 4 pillars, we are collaborating with our partners on high standard commitments and cooperation initiatives. Most recently, our partners in the region came together at the IPEF Ministerial in Singapore to connect investors with green infrastructure and energy development projects, including several promising clean energy investments here in the Philippines. Together with our partners in the Indo-Pacific region, we are building economies based on clean energy, green infrastructure, and environmentally sustainable growth. Our partnerships allow us to address important challenges together. As one of the countries most at risk from natural disasters and climate effects, the Philippines faces acute threats, and the United States stands ready to help. In the last 15 years alone, the United States has provided more than 27 billion pesos, or nearly $460 million, for disaster relief and preparedness in the Philippines. On the energy front, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has helped increase the Philippines' renewable energy capacity by 65% through green energy auctions, in which private sector companies compete in a reverse auction for contracts to supply renewable energy to the grid, resulting in 5.3 gigawatts of renewable energy projects from solar, wind, biomass, and hydro to be developed between now and 2026. USAID is also actively working with the Philippines to protect the environment and respond to the effects of climate change. During the flooding in Mindanao last February, the U.S. government was honored to work side by side with the Philippine government to provide emergency supplies to those severely affected in Davao de Oro, Davao del Norte, and Davao City. Under the Philippine government's leadership, our civilian and military agencies work together to deliver emergency food, shelter, water, and hygiene supplies. I've spoken about what we are doing with the Philippines and our partners to create a free, open, prosperous, and connected Indo-Pacific. These efforts, of course, require an Indo-Pacific that is safe and secure. For over 75 years, the United States has, in cooperation with our partners and allies, maintained a strong and consistent defense presence in the region. We are modernizing these efforts in cooperation with our partners and allies to deter aggression and defend our common interests. The U.S.-Philippine alliance is essential to that effort, and I'm happy to report that the alliance is flourishing. The United States and the Philippines have been ironclad allies since the Mutual Defense Treaty was signed in 1951, working together to address common threats. One of the cornerstones of our ironclad alliance is the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, which operationalizes our alliance. EDCA enables Filipino and American forces to more closely train together, modernize, and respond to shared threats, including natural disasters, in 9 mutually agreed upon locations throughout the Philippines. EDCA projects across these locations represent an initial investment of about $100 million, or 5 billion pesos, funding the repair of runways, construction of disaster response warehouses, and command and control infrastructure, among other projects. These infrastructure investments at EDCA locations also spur economic growth and opportunities for local communities. With the rapid advancement of technology, We recognize the growing importance of strengthening cybersecurity defenses. Next month, as the Secretary mentioned, the U.S. and Philippine senior leaders will meet in Washington for the inaugural Philippines-United States Cyber Digital Policy Dialogue. This meeting is an occasion to reaffirm our country's shared commitment to open, interoperable, reliable, and secure digital connectivity to support growth in the digital economy and deepen bilateral cooperation on cybersecurity. We are also expanding our maritime activities with partners in the region. The past year has seen a series of multilateral maritime cooperative activities involving the United States, the Philippines, Japan, Australia, Canada, and France. In April, in Honolulu, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin joined his counterparts from the Philippines, Japan, and Australia to reaffirm our shared commitment to international law in the South China Sea and enhanced quadrilateral defense cooperation. Throughout these high-level meetings and activities, we have raised concerns over actions that threaten stability and security in the Indo-Pacific. Sailing together with our partners sends a clear message that we are all committed to upholding the freedom of navigation and overflight in accordance with international law. The Indo-Pacific is the most dynamic and fastest-growing region on Earth and an essential driver of U.S. and global security and prosperity. And thanks to an unprecedented level of cooperation with friends, partners, and allies, we have made great strides in advancing our shared vision for this region. As journalists, you are on the front lines, covering conflicts and crises, elections, important global meetings that chart the future of our planet, and every other manner of major events. Let me assure you that here in the Philippines, I'm reading what you write, and I know that my fellow ambassadors and others across this region and around the world are doing the same. Your reporting is essential for us to understand when our strategy is working, when it isn't, and how we need to adjust. In a large, complex, dynamic region like the Indo-Pacific, that perspective is absolutely essential. So again, thank you very much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador, for that comprehensive overview on the relationship, the strong relationship, the U.S.-Philippines, as well as an overview of the greater Indo-Pacific. I really appreciate that. You know, I had mentioned to the Secretary that we had launched the Philippines, and I mentioned to you the Philippines Matters for America and America Matters for the Philippines in Washington, D.C. We also did that in Hawaii, the Philippines Matters for Hawaii, because we have a large population of diaspora in Hawaii from the Philippines. But this document really, along with our larger Asia Matters for America, talks about trade, investment, job creation, some of the things you hit on: security relationships, allies and partnerships, educational opportunities, and you kind of covered this whole gamut that's sort of in our publication and some of the work that we're doing. And
I think that's so important. Sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to keep this sort of informal. So, but I think please. That when you look at the prosperity agenda, and you will have noticed that was a good chunk of what I talked about. It's really important because, as I've heard President Marcos say, and as it is the case for every leader of every country, we can't defend ourselves if we can't feed our people, if we don't grow our economies, if we don't have that vibrant economic growth in propelling us forward, then we cannot purchase the items that we need to defend ourselves. We don't have the strength and the wherewithal in terms of our agricultural production. Feeding our people, literally, for our food security and nutrition security is vitally important. So all of this feeds in together. So economic security is national security, which is one of the reasons that I made a point in these remarks of focusing on that very aspect. And as you say, in Hawaii, you see that very clearly with the Filipino-American connection.
That's right, and a lot of connection with the East-West Center. I have to put that plug in there. You know, we've had alumni since 1960 from the Philippines and all of Asia. We have many here who are from all over the world, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, coming across the world, actually, because we also have alumni from around the world, coming together, convening, and a lot of the issues you touched on when we look at the broader issues, but going back to the Philippines, so I want to start there. Philippines, and then maybe moving broader into the Indo-Pacific. And you touched somewhat on the South China Sea, Philippine Sea, so my question really is, what is the most pressing issue, and you touched on many issues, but of those issues, between the United States and the Philippines today, and you touched on the PRC, and I wonder if you could peel back that a little bit and share more insights on that.
Well, I think, as we heard Secretary Manalo said, the Philippines has an agenda that stands on its own. And as our partner, we support that. They are not a pawn in a great power game. They have their own agenda that is important to the people of the Philippines. They occupy what some people call essential geography, an archipelagic nation with more water than land in its territory that has unique challenges, especially in an era of climate change. That's why it's so important that the U.S. and the Philippines are working together. So China is certainly a factor. They're a neighbor. They're a big neighbor. They've been an important trading partner for the Philippines for decades, if not centuries, when you go back to the galleon trade. So it's very important to have to be in a neighborhood where you can rely on your neighbors and where people respect the rules. If you have a fence down that's properly designated according to the county, if you're living in Arlington, Virginia, like I do now, or in Little Rock, Arkansas, where my mom still lives, you respect those rules. So if you've got a good neighbor, you don't have any problems. But when we look at what is happening in the South China Sea, and specifically the West Philippine Sea, the area close in the continental shelf of the Philippines, it's very concerning what's happening, the land reclamation, the expansive claims, but it's not only happening here. My most recent assignment was in Buenos Aires, and if you go to the exclusive economic zone off the coast of Argentina, you see the very same thing, the fishing vessels there that are taking advantage of the ability to reap natural resources and violate the sovereign rights of that particular country. When you look at another country where I've been posted, in India, same things are happening in the Indian Ocean. When you look at the border between India and China, the conflicts there, expansive claims there. What all of us want are neighbors and partners and friends who abide by international norms and obey the law, which is why we heard Secretary Manalo talk about the importance of international law, and specifically the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which has codified these regulations that were part of common international law long before they were codified in the early 80s into UNCLOS. And that body of law gives certain rights. So yes, China is a factor, but the U.S.-Philippine relationship certainly stands on its own. Even before 1951 in our Mutual Defense Treaty, we had a long and important relationship with the Philippines that had absolutely nothing to do with China. And those activities, whether it's working on education reform here, helping to rewrite the curricula for education, whether it's on, as I've mentioned, nutrition security, food security, our looking to help with infrastructure development, cybersecurity. It's about how we can help our peoples, the U.S. population, the Philippine population. And we have so many connections, not only as friends, partners, and allies. I talk about that a lot. But I should say friends, partners, allies, and family. I don't know if you realize, I know you probably do, living in Hawaii, but there are about 4.5 million Filipino Americans in the United States. And right here in the Philippines, 700,000 Americans living here. 700,000, that's more than the U.S. population in Japan and Korea combined, two of our other key allies in the region. So those close connections animate the U.S.-Philippine relationship. in a way that is very significant and would be the case no matter what big nations are doing in the region. But it is certainly in our interest to ensure that bullying behavior does not go unchecked, that we check that behavior not only for ourselves, but for the rest of the globe. I mentioned at least twice in those remarks about freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight. That's not just important for the U.S. and the Philippines. That's important for everyone. When you look at the percentage of container traffic that flows through this region, the percentage of oil, you see all kinds of numbers. Whatever numbers you look at, they're all big, right? The Indo-Pacific really matters, and that's why it's so important that we work together with all of our partners. But my job, I have the honor of being the ambassador here, so my focus right now is on the U.S.-Philippine relations, and I'm really thrilled that we are working so closely together on all these major challenges.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that comprehensive answer. And, I wanted to zoom up a little bit, and I know you have been around the world. You've served around the world, your experience, and you mentioned the Indo-Pacific. And, we talk about this, global cross-border relationships, and sometimes we create the borders of the Indo-Pacific, but really it's vast. The number of we had Sylvia Earle here yesterday who talked about one ocean. We are one ocean, one world, and it was just incredible and inspiring. But we talked a lot about the threats of AI, the threats of cyberbullying, the threats to reporting, the threats to the geopolitical threats that put pressure, the gaps between the haves and have-nots. You touched upon those threats, but I wondered if you might want to share a little bit more as we look at the audience today who come from all over this region on some of the greatest threats to that stability and security and prosperity that you mentioned, those who are not following the international law, rule of law. But there's also more. I wondered if you wanted to touch on some of those other threats in the region at this time, and maybe what the United States is doing to help work to counter some of those. And you addressed them in the Philippines, but I wondered if you might be able to address at a broader level.
I just want to reiterate how important it is, the work that all of you all are doing, especially when we look at AI, we look at elections. So this is the year of elections, right, globally. We've seen elections in India just recently. We have midterm elections coming up in 2025 here in the Philippines, but we have our own U.S. elections. We're looking at France and at the UK and around the globe. So when you look at AI and you think about journalism, you think about facts, that is a critical role that you all play to present what the truth is. When we think about how messy elections are and how chaotic democracy is, I think we should embrace it and enjoy it and go with it, party, right? I mean, as they say in India, elections are a festival of democracy. That's literally the election commission there has in their charter to promote the festival of democracy. And I think we have that luxury to be chaotic. We have that luxury to fret over AI. When you think about what's happening in China, those closed systems, that freedom of expression, freedom of the press, that doesn't exist there. So when you think about what information are their people getting? Well, it's very distorted and very one-sided. So even with the challenges of AI and these other challenges, whether it's in climate or cyber or any of these, at least we have the ability to channel to the greatest extent possible AI for good. And I understand in one of your earlier sessions talking about AI, you talked about turning the AI focus on those kind of menial tasks. I may be a Pollyanna, but I'm hopeful that AI can actually help with, say, on cancer or on some of these intractable problems that we have not, with our human abilities, been able to conquer. With truth tellers and with honest assessors, hopefully we can then channel that information we can get through AI and use it for good. In the hands of the wrong people, though, that could be very problematic. It could distort things. And coming back to the issue of elections, that can be, there's no other way to say it, can be very dangerous. That is why, no matter how good an AI engine is or a search engine, the role of what journalists do, of actually exposing the truth, telling those stories, adding the context, is absolutely critical. And I think together, that's why it's not just about what our governments are doing, it's about what our civil society is doing. It's about what our NGOs, local communities, and to the greatest extent possible, not just the big media outlets, but local media. And that's one of the things we've seen is with the rise in the ability to get information off the internet, the fading away of some of the local press outlets and local newspapers, which is really a shame because that press on the local level is what keeps government and leaders honest. It exposes any backroom deals and brings to light any concerns so that there can be an equitable and fair and transparent government process for something as simple as allocating permits for development projects. So it's absolutely critical. I'm worried about AI, but I also think there are a lot of opportunities in helping us solve some of these critical challenges.
You know, one of our panelists and our esteemed journalists who were on the stage here with you, and they did a poll real quick on how many are concerned about, are confident about AI. Maybe we should do that again. How many of you are confident about AI, that you're confident that it's going to help to make our lives better? Let's show our hands. Okay.
And how many think the robot dogs are coming tomorrow?
Okay, we have some skeptics. We have some skeptics in the audience here. And that's kind of how it was. And it was a great debate and discussion about where are those lines? And, you know, in newsrooms, many are challenged often about, lack of enough staffing, enough resources to help independent media. So opportunities like this are incredible.
And that's why at the U.S. Embassy, we also offer here within the Philippines, but at every U.S. Embassy around the world, programs designed specifically to promote journalistic ethics and to promote free press. We take journalists to the United States on our International Visitor Leadership Program and many other types of programs. We work with Fulbright also and many types of linking our private sector to organizations here to give journalists the opportunity to travel. Because we know a lot of times international exposure and connection to not just the U.S. Embassy, but to another embassy, sometimes that's life-saving support. Here in the Philippines, we have, as Secretary Manalo said, certainly now under this government, a renewed focus on underscoring the importance in their constitution of press freedom. That's not always the case, and then certainly there are pockets everywhere, including in our own country. We can't say that freedom of the press is always on a perfect trajectory. We see journalists being harassed in our own country, and that's one of the great reasons for conferences like this one. But the United States government, through our embassies internationally, does a lot to support the work that you do. And if journalists in this room are not familiar with some of our programs, when you go back to your countries or here in the Philippines, I encourage you to contact the public affairs section and see what, and if you have ideas too, we're always open to ideas. That's the other thing. If you have an idea, come to us and let's see what we can do together, because we're very interested in promoting what you do, and also hopefully in that process undergirding the foundation and protecting that freedom of the press that's so vital, not just here but everywhere in the world.
Thank you, Ambassador. We really appreciate the many embassies who actually funded some of the journalists coming from around the region here today. And also the support of the State Department for over 9. We have Susan Kreifels, who leads our media program, and over 9 journalism programs on our site, many of them funded by the U.S. State Department and with the East-West Center. Really planning and executing those programs. So thank you very much for your support. And so, when we look at, we're coming close on time here. You gave a lot of advice to journalists and a lot of support that we're hearing. But just some final thoughts that you might have on what would you say? We have some young journalists here too, and we have seasoned journalists in here. We've heard panels on every topic that you can imagine, and there just doesn't seem to be enough time. But maybe advice that you might have for them in this very complex environment.
Well, I guess I would say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for what you do. And we at the U.S. Embassy are, not just here, but around the globe, we are here to do what we can to support. I will also say that even when it seems like, is the field of journalism even going to be around in a decade or in our children's lifetime? I think about what folks have said about diplomacy. With the advent of telecommunications, I remember early on in my career, now 39 years ago, it's like, the diplomatic corps is going to shrink. We're not going to need people. We have, you can pick up a phone and back. Remember in the day when we used to envision that one day there might be a telephone where you could actually see the person on the screen and the other. When that happened, there would be no need to send people abroad. Well, that hasn't proved to be the case. And I think even with AI, even with the internet and ways to get information, having that human interaction is still essential. And as it is in diplomacy, I think it absolutely is in journalism as well. And when I think about, how do I define diplomacy, it's building relationships of trust, so that you can reach your shared objectives based on or common objectives based on your shared values. And I think that's a lot of what journalists do as well. You build relationships of trust so that you can keep people honest, so that based on values, that you can get the truth out, so that governments and peoples can make the right decisions about the news and circumstances that are affecting them. So I just want to come back to say thank you very much. I have confidence that even though it may seem, even though certainly you are under attack, there's no doubt about it, many of you, sometimes literally under physical attack and working in dangerous circumstances, that the profession of journalism is an honorable one, an essential one, and that the U.S. government will do everything that we can to protect that, to protect you, and to work with you. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you for your inspiring words. Thank you for being here and your support of journalists. We are so honored that you would spend your time with us today. And please, another round of applause for our U.S. Ambassador.
Thank you.